what signals are you sending out every single time you post, every single like month that people are following you? Is it sending the right ones or is it sending the wrong ones? Is it building your brand or is it taking away? So if you just post 30 GIFs in a row, just trolling about politics, for instance, like then I think you're just the circus clown that talks about politics in a very funny, engaging way. But I'm never going to trust you with my business to help me, I don't know, 3x my ROI. Like,
Yeah.
what do you know?
Jason, it's awesome to have a fellow data nerd. And let's get into branding versus marketing. But specifically, well, I really want to hear about the hidden psychology of branding. So what's happening behind the scenes that people don't even realize, you know? So when someone is looking at what you do, at how you position yourself online, there's a lot happening inside their heads that we don't even think about it. We don't even realize. So on this subject, what do you think like people will get at the end of this episode?
Yeah. So I think the one thing that I want people to take away most is that branding and marketing isn't something that you should be leaving to chance or anecdotal advice. And so what I mean by that is that like science has hundreds of years of rigorous research into human behavior, decision making, and even like trust building, right? So it gives us frameworks that we can use for our own businesses. And it's not limited to a single person's experience or a single team's experience. If you're talking about agencies, for instance. And so while most business coaches or even other branding agencies rely on what worked for them in the past and their immediate circle, like the people that coached them, that's great and all. But research spans much broader than that. So across cultures, industries, decades of findings that can offer really systematic advice for what you should be doing next, right? So they have thousands of data points. You might have a few dozen at any single point for a single question you have. And so when we apply science to branding, we're not just creating like a logo or tagline, which I'm sure we'll jump into later, but we're engineering trust at every single level. And like that's the take home part. Like that's the juicy part for me is how do we apply science to branding?
Yeah, that's amazing, and I love that opening. Hopefully, we'll be able to deliver as much as possible on that. Actually, on that note, there's a book that most copywriters read often. Some of us read yearly. It's called Scientific Advertising from Claude Hopkins. This book was written in 1920. Still, all the best copywriters recommend that you have to continue reading this book. And the way Claude Hopkins opens the book is marketing is a science. There is nothing new to be invented. It has been studied to the last cent because people are spending money on it, you know, so they want a return. And this was in 1920 when he said there's nothing new under the sun. It's a science. So imagine now. And we are still all following Claude Hopkins' advice, which is quite
Yeah.
amazing.
And this is super cool, dude, because so like when we're talking about research with our clients and we try like applying a more science-backed approach, if I cite something from like 2005, they're like, that's old. I'm like, that's old. I'm like, that's like hundreds of years of experience and research brought you to that point. And it might be 20 years old and it's slightly dated, but it still works. Like nothing has changed from a human behavior perspective in the last 20 years. Well, I mean, some things have changed, but fundamentally it hasn't, right? So if you're using research and stuff that's been done in the 1920s, then like that is standing on the shoulders of giants. It's not like minimizing the effect of that because it's 100 years old.
You said something very important there. You said human behavior didn't change. There's a few tweaks, yes, but it's human behavior behind everything. That's what we're addressing here. With marketing, with branding, what we're studying and what we want to engage with is with other humans. And we want to understand how they behave so they can behave in a way that benefits both parties. Am I right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you want to tell us a little bit, Jason, what brought you into branding? How did you come from the science world to branding? And if you want to touch a little bit on your story that I really liked following along on LinkedIn with Melanie,
Yeah.
that was a fun romance story. If you want to touch on that,
Yeah. I'm happy to jump into that. I'll probably monologue for like 5 minutes here, but interrupt me at any point if I start
let's go.
rambling. So yeah, so it started off, I think May of last year, May of 2023, because it felt to me that I had a lot of things to say that didn't necessarily fit into academia or within the lab at the time, right? You have limited time with other peers and colleagues. I'm not always like the typical scientist approach where you're in the lab for 10 hours, like with your little pipette and stuff. I'm a psychologist and a researcher, so that's not the field of study that I'm in. And so I spent years as a psychology researcher, like buried with papers and data, and I wanted to be able to share that information with people because science isn't very accessible, right? If someone sends you a link to a paper or references it, you can't access it. You have to pay £50 to get it, or a few $100s for a subscription to the journal. And I'm like, I have this knowledge. I'm passionate about this stuff. I'd love to share it because it actually has practical application for people's lives.
And then understanding
And my
is another issue.
Yeah, yeah. If so, I don't know how many like research papers you've opened, but for anyone who like hasn't read research papers, like the formatting of it is horrendous. It's like size 9 font. It's like 10 pages long. It's like reading a whole newspaper to get a single lesson. It's horrible.
Yeah, I've seen my fair share because I like to go to the source, and I'm a nerd, information nerd.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah, but it's hard. It's hard. It's very hard to understand. And I know that a lot of people, they don't have they're not they don't. That's why I call myself a nerd. They don't nerd
yeah,
out
yeah,
on data like this, and they struggle then to understand because it's not prepared for regular people to understand.
yeah. And back to your point about like getting to the source of the information, the further away you get from the source, like I heard it from this person who heard it from this person who actually read the research paper, like truth is getting distilled and or just
Yeah.
redirected entirely every single time. Like the game of telephone, right? You say one thing and then like 15 people later, it's a completely different story. So that's why getting to the source matters a lot. If it's going to be like the foundation of your decision making for your business and for your brand, make sure that that is correct and you're not going on false data or hearsay from a friend of a friend of a friend.
Yeah, yeah. Especially in marketing and branding, it's really, really important. That's one of the things that I like the most because we get lost in LinkedIn algorithm, LinkedIn's way of doing things, and we forget that it's still human interaction and it's still the basics of human behavior. So, sorry, we got a bit off track. Do you want to keep going with your story?
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. So that's relevant because I wanted an outlet or somewhere that I could share my ideas and my own insights without having to overthink stuff, right? So that's when LinkedIn came into the picture. I had this science communication background through like presenting because I did a lot of coaching around that. I even did a TED talk, but I haven't had the practice or the skill sets developed to do it in written form. And so that's why I kind of got on LinkedIn. I needed an outlet and develop a new skill set. So at first it was just like an experiment for me, or so I thought. Like, let's see if I can write about psychology and science in an engaging way, get people interested in it, get people asking questions, and then I get to learn more in the process. So I started posting science communication carousels, critiques of research, which like many people didn't really understand. They're like, what the heck is this? And I'm like, all right, tone it down a bit, Jason. I went too academic. And then just insights into psychology because my PhD research, when I started off, was on mental health, specifically around depression. So very applicable to a lot of people who have like experience with depression. So yeah, to my surprise, people kind of responded to that. My post started gaining some traction, and then before long, I shifted from just talking about science to something that was more personal, which is the mental health side of it. I want to take things to the next level at some point. I'm like, I need to figure out how to do this LinkedIn stuff properly. So I joined a group program or like a coaching program for LinkedIn. And then that's when kind of Millie got into the picture. I sent her a DM like a few weeks beforehand. She never answered me. She's not great with DMs, probably to my benefits, right? So she doesn't have all these people jumping into her DMs about it. But yeah, we were in the group coaching program together. So that's when we kind of met each other for the first time, decided to hop on coffee chats thereafter. She was really interested in the psychology and the neuroscience of branding and marketing because she had her own business and her own brand around Graewolves for I think 5-6 years by that point. She was more focused on the like content creation, ghostwriting, copywriting side of branding. And then yeah, we just hit it off with the psychology and the neuroscience. So I'm like, I have a lot of research experience with that stuff. Let's chat about it. And I can pause there before I monologue more. But yeah, that was kind of like the start of it.
So Melanie already had Grey Wolves for 5 years when you met.
Yeah, yeah. She had Graewolves for 5 years by that point. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And then when you met, did you start working with her straight away?
No. So there was the kind of courting part at the start where we were just like getting to know each other, talking about the psychology, mental health stuff, and like talking about mental health. At some point, you're going to get to something vulnerable, and you choose like there's a fork in the road. You either choose to be vulnerable or you choose to just avoid that altogether. But I have like a lot of experience talking about mental health, so we both chose like the vulnerable route, which to our benefit led to us connecting at an even deeper level. Here comes the cheesy romancy stuff. But yeah, she got like a peer into me and I got like a good vision into her. And there was just a deeper connection because of that. Eventually, over talking, then the business stuff came after, but it was really the relationship building, the connection part that came first.
Right. And what made you think that it made sense for you to bring science into branding? Was it
Mm.
something with her? Was it like between the relationship between the two of you that like she suggested? What happened?
So the relationship started first. I think she was expressing a lot of frustrations around the work that she was doing because when you try ghostwriting or copywriting without the branding set in place first, it's like almost impossible. You're always going to miss in terms of the copy that you write if you don't have a specific target, like even ICP stuff. If you don't know who you're speaking to, the copy's never going to hit. Right? So she was expressing that. And then in terms of the marketing or the research side of it, I'm like, there's actually a lot of research that supports this is the way you should be doing it for these types of people. So if we're talking about ICP. And then at some point, it just made sense for us to kind of team up together and try and launch a program. So that's what we did in November of last year. So almost exactly a year ago. We launched like a small cohort of 14 founders kind of joined it. We taught the science of branding. I was doing the very scientific approach of it. She was doing the more applicable side of branding. So that was our first start into it. And then it just took off from there because it was really cool.
That's nice. So I think this is a good segue into talking about like what branding is. So I know there's a lot of misconceptions around branding. A lot of people, when you say the word brand, they think about the logo and fonts and that colors and that's it. But every word that you put out is actually part of your brand. You're building a brand with everything you do, right? So do you wanna talk a little bit about that? Like what are you should people know to resist against this trend of the wrong knowledge? Let's say on
Yeah, yeah.
LinkedIn specifically.
I feel like it's hard to avoid wrong knowledge on LinkedIn just because it's very prevalent. Not to like point the finger and be like LinkedIn's the problem. It's just that people latch on to the stuff that's easiest to talk about, which in
Mm-hmm.
this case is the bite-sized stuff that isn't necessarily representative of what branding is as a whole. And then you'll have always like the chat GPT lines like branding isn't a logo or design, but then everyone always talks about logo and design, right? Like you're saying one thing, but then you think of the other. So yeah, it is much more than just the graphical element or the design element of it. If you take like the Marty Neumeier definition of it, or even like the Jeff Bezos definition of it's what people think you are, or like their perception of you, or who they think you are when you're not in the room. Like Marty
That's
Neumeier said
really
the
good.
first,
Yeah.
Jeff Bezos said the second. I like to take a bit more of like a scientific approach to it. So I'm like, it's the signals that are like emitted or that you send out before people even get to know you or get to talk to you. So that does include graphics, right? So if your banner is meant,
Absolutely.
if your banner looks like it was made on like Windows 95 in Paint, but then you're trying to sell like a 20K offer, like there's a disconnect. This looks very cheap and old, and not in a vintage nice way, but like in a just bad way. And then you're trying to sell like a high premium ticket offer, like that doesn't make any sense. There's a disconnect. You're sending like a red signal and then a green signal. There's a misalignment with it. So yeah, that's kind of like our take on it. We like to focus a lot more on signals. If you're targeting this person with this offer, everything you do is just sending green lights, green signals across the board to communicate that to them.
With that person, yeah, with that
Yeah,
specific person. All right, so I think
yeah.
this is where it makes sense to talk about how do you know who this person is, and how do you find out the information, more information about this person, right? So because there's a very simple way that Dana and I have spoken here. If you're just starting out, then start talking to people. That's the first thing you should do. Send DMs, ask to jump on calls with people, tell them you're doing research, just do coffee calls because you need to get to know that person. But then if we're talking at scale, and because I create sales funnels and I write copy, sales copy, not the copywriting that is nowadays referred to, which is ghostwriting on LinkedIn, right? So I need to understand that audience. So I know a lot about audience research. I've done a lot of it, and I feel that it's one of the biggest gaps that people have on LinkedIn nowadays. It's this part of the audience research to understand exactly who they're targeting with their messaging, with their brand, with everything they're doing. How do you know who these people are and who your person is? And how do you know what you need to know about them?
Okay, so the academic side of my brain wants to answer it this way, so I'll go with this first. Such a thing as good data and bad data, right? If you're just interviewing everyone, there's going to be a lot of bad data in it that's going to send you in the wrong direction. If they're if I want to sell hamburgers and I'm interviewing like sushi vendors, like there's every piece of data that I'm going to collect is going to be wrong and it's going to send me down the wrong path. It's going to turn me into a sushi vendor, not into the master chef of hamburger.
Right.
I don't know what the right word is, right? So yeah, it's not going to turn me into that chef. It's going to turn me into this chef. So you have to make sure that you do your own market research first in terms of like what's your own intersection of expertise, like what are you actually good at? Because if you develop something that there's a need for, but you suck at delivering, whether it's a product or a service, people won't pay you for it. So you've wasted your time. Find something that you're good at, figure out in terms of market research what exists, what solutions are already available, what things are selling, right? So if ghostwriting is a hot thing like 3 years ago because AI didn't exist, then great. Ghostwriting is the right thing to be doing. People are making millions of dollars with it.
That's a very
Now
good.
people
That's a
are
very
just,
good one. I want to interrupt you there, and I'm sorry for
yeah, yeah.
that, but because I
No,
think
no,
that's
go.
a very important thing to talk about. It's a bit counter to intuitive for people who are not in the business, right? Who are not in branding or marketing. But the fact that you said like go into something that already exists, people are afraid of the word competition. There's a lot of competition on this, so I shouldn't do it. Well, competition validates demand. So if there is competition, it means there is demand, right? So it's usually counterintuitive. People want to do something new, something that hasn't been done, but that is risky. There's a lot of risk there. Leave that for the big brands, for the guys with money to invest.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like if an angel investor wants to spend $5 million on a risk, then that's their decision. But like if you're trying to get rent for next month, then don't do something like that, right? Find something that you know is going to sell and that works, and then put your own like unique spin on it. Like you need to differentiate your service or your product from whatever else exists, but you know it's going to work because there's the market validation that people are paying for it already. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So now you're finding something that is already being sold, something that is already being done. What's next?
Yeah. So what's next is figuring out like what your unique spin is on it. So like you can have really strong copy, they'll have really strong copy. You can post more often, they're going to post more often. You're going head to head with competitors, which if you have a big brand, that's okay, maybe you have an advantage, but most of the time you're an underdog. So if
Your
you're competing
USP.
against like yeah, yeah. If you're competing against I don't know, just name top personal brander on LinkedIn, whatever their name is. I'm not going to start dropping names. But if you're selling the same thing as them, you're just going to lose. They have a bigger audience, a bigger voice. People are going to pay more just because of the name. So you
Yeah.
need to find a unique take on it so that it's different. And so when people land on both of your services, they're like, actually, this is more in alignment with what I need, even though you only have maybe like 15 testimonials instead of 1,500 testimonials.
Yeah.
Because what you're
Yeah.
serving is hitting a pain point that I have as a buyer that I need. I don't need the generic solution. I need the very tailored, specific solution. And that's what you're selling. So that's what I'm going to buy.
So that's where you connect what is necessary, so what is in demand, with what you with your expertise, I guess, with who you are,
Yeah.
right? So that's how you can
Yeah.
differentiate yourself, is by being yourself, by leveraging other skills that you have, I guess. How do you connect this part, this personal part of you, to to the service you're providing, to give that unique spin?
Yeah. Yeah. There's going to be a lot of trial and error at the start. And there's going to be even more trial and error if you haven't done the research first. So that's why with like every client that we work with, especially the solopreneurs who are still trying to figure out what is it like, what's my flagship offer, there is experimentation involved. If you have two different ICPs, right? So we're working with right now like a book coach. He helps high school students write personal essays to get into like Ivy League universities. That's part of his work because he used to be a professor for 15, 20 years, like in English literature. So that's part of his ICP. The other part is founders that want to write a book to build their own personal brand, thought leadership, blah, blah, blah. One sells for 1,000, the other one could sell for like 20,000. But how do you pick which one works best is you need to experiment with both. You need to serve both to figure out what is it the work that you prefer to do and what work could actually get paid enough for to be happy. So if you want to be making 500K, you're going to have to sell 500 of the $1,000 offers. Are you capable of doing that? Or you sell a fraction of those at the 20K offer. Are you capable of doing that?
Yeah, that's a good point. So you need to know your goals as well, like where you want to get with
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then again, like the demand has to be there. You have to differentiate yourself so that you do stand out for the right reasons, not just because you're loud and posting memes and posting GIFs all the time, because that's easy to stand out with that. You make people laugh. Maybe this ties into like a segue point. But if all you're doing is posting memes and GIFs, you're going to get a lot of attention, a lot of visibility, but no one's going to take you seriously. or they're going to take you seriously if that's what you're selling. If you're selling like a gift service, then fine, you're the expert at that. But if you're trying to sell, I don't know, ghostwriting for lawyers and all you do is post gifts, what kind of a lawyer is going to trust that process?
All right. There is something there that is very interesting to discuss. Like that we see a lot of the cliche, be authentic, right? So, how much of yourself should you be putting out there? And how do you know that that is building your brand the right way, right? So, I'm not just going to be talking about my dogs and whatever, everything I have, like there has to be, we could be personal, but we can't be personal about everything because we need to choose our audience, right? So how do you find the right proportions there, or what to share?
Yeah, this comes down to like, are you focused more on the personal branding side or the business branding side? Both can make you a lot of money. The business branding is just, in my view, like a more guaranteed shot of making you money than the personal branding side. People have to like really buy into you and value you as a person instead of just the service or the offer that you have, right? So that's much easier to sell in my mind if you do the right research first. So everyone who's like, be authentic, like show your true colors and like talk about all your stories and experiences, they're feeding you into the personal branding route, and then they're just making money off of selling you personal branding advice. So it kind of becomes a pyramid scheme in that way. It happens
Yeah,
with coaches all the time too. Like LinkedIn coaching, they're making money off of coaching you how to make money on LinkedIn, which then you have to go and make money on LinkedIn. But then can they sell anything else? No. So if they don't
yeah.
have you, they don't have a business, right? So you just need to be careful about that. I think I digressed. What was the initial question?
Yeah, so I think it's a little bit of the personal branding versus the branding, business branding in general. But I do feel like most people who are following us are more interested in the personal branding side of things. And we were talking about the authenticity, how much of yourself should you be sharing. But there's one thing here, like I see even the big brands, a lot of them in this is my perception. The online world nowadays it demands a lot more of a face. So there's a lot of personal branding even into business branding, I would say. What's your take on
Yeah,
that? And how do you
100%.
how do you know how much of you to share?
Yeah, yeah. I think so. A lot of times, what that ends up creating is a founder led business. So, if the founder is not in the picture, you're not going to make any sales, you're not going to make any money, which is fine for the start, right? But if you at some point want to detach and not always have to be posting every day and start like yapping on camera on podcasts like every week, right? If you want to be able to just take 6 months off from your business and still have it run and operate, then you need to be careful with what you're building. If you're building the business brand, it's meant to operate without you. If you're building a personal brand or a founder led business, it's going to operate with you at the helm. And if you step away, it's going to be very hard to do. Right.
That's a
So, like,
very
if
good
Justin
point.
Welsh
Yeah.
stopped writing, I mean, he probably has a team of people that helps him out with stuff. But if he stopped posting and he stopped doing, like, I don't know, any kind of podcast, he doesn't do podcasts often. But if he stops creating content, stops sending out newsletters, then what is he going to sell? He becomes like faceless and he's the face of the business.
Yeah, you raise a very good point as well, because it also depends on what are your goals at the end. Like what's your exit? Like do you want to sell the business? Because if you're building your personal brand, this will work for other businesses, right? If you close that business or sell it and then start a new one, your personal brand is still building up to that, right? But if the business brand can be sold, when you sell it, it's going with the business, right? So that's a very important one. So you need to be conscious of both, I would say.
Yeah, and I think like at the start, if we're talking to like mostly solopreneurs who are probably like people listening, it's not a thought that ever crosses your mind, but it should be a thought that crosses your mind. Like, what do you want to be doing 2 years from now? What do you want to be doing 10 years from now? Do you want to be posting content every day or not? That influences like the direction that you're going today. And it's like a thought process or a reflection that you need to go through because again, yeah, like it puts you into a certain direction and it's very hard to pivot out of it. I think like Hormozy, it took him a year to be able to sell the business he was in because he was the face of it and he had to slowly take steps back before he can exit. And that was him. Like you're not him, right? You're gonna have a much harder time to do something of that nature.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you guys do when you're working with, let's say, coaches, for example? Do you tell them to focus on both, so their business brand and the personal brand, or how does it work?
For most clients, again, it's going to depend on the situation, but like there has to be a strong connection between the personal brand and the business brand. So if you're just writing stories and talking about your offer, but you're not talking about your business, then you're failing. So for instance, like we worked with Jacob Peggs for a short period of time, and he always great content creator, great coach, great at everything he does. but he would rarely talk about Modern Maker in a way that puts the emphasis on Modern Maker. He would
Yeah.
talk about himself and his offer and like his proprietary frameworks, which is cool, but that doesn't put in my head I want to become a Modern Maker. There's no like aspirational identity that I'm building towards. But as soon as you start doing that, it takes things to the next level. People buy into the brand of Modern Maker instead of this LinkedIn offer guy who can help me make like my first 10K, for instance.
All right.
There's like a greater purpose, a greater mission to it.
That's really good. Can you talk more about this thing of the aspirational identity? That's a very interesting one. Actually, I'm working with a client right now. That like my focus is always direct response marketing. So everything I do, I like to see a direct return. For every post, there have to be people subscribing to your email list. From those, I need to know what percentage is actually buying your first offer. But we took a step back. He wanted to launch a newsletter and he wanted to build a brand around the newsletter. So I was always very copy focused and stuff. He started building that aspirational identity. For me, that it's almost like putting a stop sign in front of me. Stop what you're doing. I want to do this. I want to do some branding. Stop marketing. I mean, I believe they both can work in conjunction. And I think this is a good time to speak about this. But I don't know if you've seen like Russell Brunson and Gary Vaynerchuk. They had a huge fallout. I think they didn't speak to each other for a year or more because of this. Because they had an argument about branding versus marketing. For me, you should be branding because it's the long term thing you're building, but it should be always enough product of your marketing because the marketing is what's paying the bills, right? So the direct response. What's your take on that?
Yeah, yeah. I think you need to balance short term and long term, right? So if all you do is direct response copy, it's going to make you money in the short term because it's proven to work if you're hiring the right person, of course. But long term, like our critique of that kind of an approach is that there's no brand behind. Anyone can write that and it'll still work. There's no uniqueness. There's nothing relating it back to, in our instance, Graewolves. In let's just say like Ferrari or Porsche. Like if they have the exact same copy and they don't show you the car and why that car looks different and like the different benefits or status symbols that you can acquire from it, like it's just a car that gets me from A to Z. Where's the branding part of it, right? So then if you need to make money in the short term, 100% go for like direct response copy. Even long term, it's still going to be beneficial, but you need to find a way to bring it back to the brand into like your own USP, the undifferentiating part. So if I never talked about Grey Wolves and like what we do differently, and it's just here's the benefits of branding, then any branding person can copy my post, paste it, and then also make money. But then how do you know who to pick, right? They do branding, we do branding, it's the same thing. We're saying the same stuff.
Right, that's really good, and now I'm learning from this a lot. I wanna ask you something more actionable. I've noticed that when you comment or react to posts, you actually use your personal profile on LinkedIn, and you also use your brand page, right? That's something that I don't do. I know that business pages, they don't do much as in organic reach. They're mostly useless from that point of view on LinkedIn. Um, what is like? Why do you do this? Why do you always use the business page? And what is the purpose? Like, is it to be seen constantly? Is that what you're trying to get in people's minds?
Yeah, it's to reinforce the association, right? And that's like the whole part of branding is to reinforce the association. And then back to what I was saying at the start, to send the right signals. So if you think of Jason, you think of Grey Wolves. If you think of Grey Wolves, you think of Jason. Millie too. So when she does the same thing, you
That's
see Grey
good.
Wolves, you think of Millie. You see Millie, you think of Grey Wolves. It's always the same thing. And then we're top of mind when it comes to branding because that's what Grey Wolves is. It's not top of mind because we always share coffee pictures, for instance, right? That would be the personal branding side of it. If you're thinking about I need branding services, you're not going to think of those two people always take pictures of coffee. They're like, oh, actually, they're part of Grey Wolves, and that's what Grey Wolves has to offer. So I'm going to go speak to them. But yeah, it's to reinforce the association. It's still like in an experimental thing that we're doing using both accounts, like not intermittently, but like consecutively. If it's going to work out, who knows? I'll be able to tell you next year probably. But yeah, it's to keep hammering home. Jason equals Grey Wolves. Millie equals Grey Wolves. Grey Wolves equals Jason plus Millie.
But you have others as well, don't you?
Other profiles, accounts.
Business.
Yeah, those are cheeky ones. So we have like the Wolf Pack and we have brands. Well, Brands That Bite is the name of our newsletter, and we're probably gonna like
Ah, okay,
if we
okay.
do a podcast at some point, that's gonna carry over to other things. But yeah, that just kind of ties into the whole wolf theme, the wolf analogy. So whenever we put like wolf emojis too, again, it's really hammering home Grey Wolves. that's what's going to make you stand out and strengthen that association.
Sam is not really asking a question. She's talking about this specifically. So I can say that working with wolves made me realize that I, as in Sam, is not what people are buying. I had to learn how to separate Sam from untethered Phoenix because I don't help my clients, my program does. Can you elaborate on that? But as a coach, you are the one doing the work, right?
Yes, but if all you get into is me, myself, and I, then it becomes like a bit of a personality game. Whose personality am I buying into? And that's like another myth of branding is like let your personality come through and that's your differentiating factor. Like that's nonsense. Everyone has a different personality. No one's buying into a specific personality type. And like I don't know if there's 16 personalities if you're an INFTJ versus an ENFTJ. Like I don't give two shits about it, excuse my French, but can you actually help me with what I'm struggling with? In Sam's case, it's related to mental health, it's related to other traumatic experiences, right? So that's what you're selling. And then your approach comes from your own experience, your approach comes from the different frameworks that you've developed over time, but that's what you're selling. Like you are the vessel, you are the facilitator of that service,
Of
but they're
that, so
buying
yeah.
into the transformation, which is I'm here, I want to get there. You can help me do that through your brand, through your business.
Right. That's really good. Yeah, I like that. So I know we moved a bit away from research, but I know there was something you wanted to talk about still in the research phase. So we're still finding out more about our ideal client. And there's something that you mentioned that you wanted to talk about. It's Reddit, which is my favorite research platform.
I
Tell me
wanted to
about
flip
it.
that to you first before you flip it to me. No, you tell me about Reddit.
Okay. The reason I love Reddit is first of all, there's a lot of information there. It's an absolute gold mine. And then there's one special thing that Reddit has that in all other places you don't have. So if you go on LinkedIn and you start reading comments, the comments are so filtered because we're afraid of looking bad and stuff. Reddit is anonymous. So people don't care. They say everything. They talk about everything in their lives because nobody knows who's talking. And so I find that it's an absolute gold mine for to understand a specific segment of an audience, like what they struggle with, because they're actually telling you the truth. They're not telling you what they think you want to hear.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that. The anonymity of Reddit, if you're going into the right subreddit, is going to get you genuine responses, pain points, what they're looking for, transformations that you could lean into with the service that you provide. There's obviously the whole troll side of Reddit, but when it comes to like other platforms like Instagram, TikTok, even LinkedIn, if your name, your face, your profile is attached to what you're commenting, it's going to be different. And there's also a lot more trolls because there's just a lot more people on it. So it really kind of filters that stuff out, right? People are going to be a lot more genuine, authentic. Let's bring that word back in. But then you can really figure out the specific emotions that they're feeling too because of that level of transparency with what they're posting. So instead of just saying like, I'm depressed, it sucks, like you will get deep. Like I am depressed because of this and my parents' upbringing taught me this and now I'm stuck with this problem and I don't know how to get out of it and it feels like there's 1,000 pounds on my chest. Like you'll get that response instead of something more superficial. And that's the things which if you're trying to develop a service to help people and you genuinely care about giving back to the world and to like humanity as a whole, like that's the kind of stuff that you need to understand and know in the market research phase.
Right. Well, what goes into your work of setting up a brand for someone?
Ooh, what goes into the work? Holy smokes, that's a big question. How do I answer
Yeah,
that
like
succinctly?
I'm sort of trying to get out of you like what branding is in a more direct way, like so. Let's say that now I want to work with you, right? And you have Fran. I'm on LinkedIn as Fran Calado. Then you have I have this podcast with Dana, and so how would you approach helping me with my branding?
Let me pull up my sales pitch document quick. No, I'm kidding. So, okay, yeah. If you came to us, we need to, I think, if I remember these properly in order, the 5 questions is what do you do? Who do you do it for? Why should someone pick you instead of any other person in that niche? What's the transformation piece? And then there's a final element to it, which off the top of my head I don't remember, but that's fine, right? You need to say that in a way that's clear, so there's no like ambiguity around it. Back to the direct response copy, that's always very clear. Sometimes it's boring, generic, vanilla, which is a problem because then it just sounds like everybody else. There's no brand voice to it, but you need to be clear. You can't be too creative with it. And that's a problem in branding, is sometimes it's like overly creative. Back to what we are saying, like marketing's more of a science, branding's more of an art in people's minds. You need to find the overlap. Be clear, have proven systems in place so that it's repeatable, so that if you get client one, I don't know, X percentage increase in revenue, let's just use that metric, you're going to get client two, something very similar to that, because you're following the same framework. You're not just winging it every single time. Which when we work with coaches, a lot of times they're like, oh, it's very bottom up. Like whatever they come to the session with is what we work on. And like, I don't have a structure in place. Like we let the client lead the way. I'm the coach, I'm the guide. But I'm like, you need that structure in place. Like that's what helps build that trust in you, that you know what you're doing. You've done this thousands of times before. Just put it into a framework. You are following some kind of intuition, if you want to call it that, or science, if you want to call it that. And that's repeatable. That's what gets results. That's what people buy into. So we
Yeah,
need to be able to develop those frameworks.
it brings us back to that cliche: you're building a brand whether you know it or not, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah. And
Yeah.
again, like back to the start, like the thing that we love to focus on is the signals. Like what signals are you sending out every single time you post? Every single like month that people are following you? Is it sending the right ones or is it sending the wrong ones? Is it building your brand or is it taking away? So if you just post 30 gifs in a row, just trolling about politics, for instance, like then I think you're just the circus clown that talks about politics in a very funny, engaging way. But I'm never going to trust you with my business to help me, I don't know, 3x my ROI. Like,
Yeah.
what do you know about?
How do you know which are the right signals? Like, or how do you measure? Like, how do I know I'm not being? And it brings us back to what we spoke about before, being overly authentic. That's a very
Mm,
interesting one. Like, I remember a while back, my wife wanted to use her social media to talk about stuff that she's interested in, and she was like, "But I want to talk about this, and I want to talk about this, and I want to talk about this." And I was like, "Listen, there's only one person that cares about all those things together. It's you." That's why you're unique, because when you speak about all those things, that's you. If you speak about one, you'll find a group of people that care about it. If you speak about two, then there's an intersection, right? So now there's a smaller group of people. If you start putting more and more of your interests together, now you're eliminating everyone else but you. So how do you find out, like, this is to be conscious of the brand you're building behind you?
yeah. I think that's the importance of hiring an expert to help you out, is because they have that external, more
Absolutely.
objective lens or view of what's happening, right? You're too close to the fire. You, as like the business owner, can't read the label from within the bottle, right? Like this is the signals you're sending out, but you're inside. You can't see this. You can't see what's going out. You need somebody on the outside to see that. And so that's like many times when you hire a business coach, that's what they're helping you through. When you hire a consultant and you're B2B with, I don't know, some mega biopharma company that has hundreds of employees, why do you still outsource stuff? To get that external perspective without the
Yeah.
biases from within.
Yeah.
So step one, I think, is to hire somebody that you trust that's going to help you get to where you want to get to, because they have experiences and they've done it before with previous clients. It's just going to help you out. If you have the resources, or even if you don't, like, what can you cut if that actually is a priority to you? If you really
Absolutely.
care about your
Yeah.
business, like where else are you going to sacrifice to make that work? So it's not like all sunshine and rainbows, right? Like you need to make sacrifices to get stuff
Yeah, yeah,
delivered.
definitely. I mean, my inbound system is 1,000 times worse than all my clients.
Yeah, even our website was pretty bad compared to the websites for our clients, and I'm like, we need to fix that. So now it's down. Now we're fixing it, but it's
Yeah,
true.
yeah, yeah, yeah. The cobbler's son has no shoes, right?
Yeah, yeah,
No, but you said it. You said it very well. Like, you can't see the label from inside the bottle. It's very hard. It's really hard, and that's why I think there's something that helps. There is having like a network of people with whom you communicate often. Like, if you don't have a coach or someone external that you hire for that, then at least having a support group of sorts.
yeah, yeah. We created a pitch deck, I think like maybe 6 weeks ago or something, for Graewolves to send. So we have like a 2 call system, like discovery call and then like the proper sales call that comes after that. And we would send the pitch deck in between to give extra information that people would want to know about the business. I sent that to 8 people that I trust, and they all gave me feedback on it. They essentially like grilled the pitch deck, which I thought was good, but I knew could be better. But we're inside the bottle. We can't figure out, am I being clear? Am I saying the right stuff?
Right.
Is it sending out the right signals? I need to ask other people for feedback. And that like goes back to the science perspective. Like we cite and reference hundreds of other papers when we like do our research. Maybe in the final product, there's 50 references. Sometimes there's 250 references in a single paper, but you're building off of the expertise of others to put your work together. That's what makes it strong. That's what makes it rigorous. That's what makes it kind of pass the litmus test in a way. So find
Yeah,
ways to get that feedback, to get other experts to refine what you're doing, because it's never going to be as good as it could be if you're just by yourself.
yeah, absolutely. So you start from what's already working, right?
Yeah.
That's what we do in
And
marketing as well. Yeah,
yeah. And then there's also bad data. So if you ask the wrong person for feedback, they're going to send you the wrong way.
yeah,
Like,
yeah. No,
if I asked you for design advice, I mean, I don't think you'd be able to give me the best design advice. I would ask a proper
not at
designer
all.
who's, yeah, exactly, right? So, like, that's the thing. Like, I need to make sure I'm asking the right people for feedback depending on what it is that I'm looking out for. If I needed the diagnosis for like a growth on my forearm, I wouldn't come
Yeah,
to you. I'd go to a doctor. Same thing
absolutely.
applies to your business. Don't just ask anyone for anything.
Well, I have a rule of thumb in marketing. It's the only correct feedback is the one that people give you with their wallets. Because a lot of times people say they want something or they would buy something, but when you actually ask them to pay for it, me, you know, so that happens so often.
And a lot of the work we do with clients is because their offer isn't selling. And like they're getting a bunch of great feedback. There's a lot of interest in the comments. They get hundreds of likes on their posts. They get like dozens of I'm interested comments, and then like nothing sells. So they come to us, they're like, why is this not working? And I'm like, okay. So there's interest, you're doing something right, but there's still a gap between somebody giving you $500 or 5K or 50K, whatever it is that you're trying to sell. We need to figure out what that gap is and then bridge it.
Do you feel like it's hard for people to identify that problem? Like to understand that interest is not translating into actual purchase interest?
Oh yeah, it's very hard. Even for us, again, like when you're within the business, you know too much almost. You look at too many things. You never could pick out what the one thing is. And then from a scientific perspective, you have to change one variable at a time to figure out, is that actually where the problem was? If I change my banner, my messaging, and I have 3 new offers, and then I just launch all that on January 1st, and I'm like, why didn't my previous offer work? I have no freaking clue why it didn't work. I
Yeah,
changed 16 things at once. So you
yeah,
could never learn from that process other than these 16 things made me money, but I don't know which one thing was the problem.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Then you're starting over. You're starting everything over again. Like if you change everything, then your assessment is starting from this from scratch again. All right. So let's. How do you find out what people want to pay for?
That's where I think like the one-on-one interviews or focus groups or even like surveys or polls comes in. So like you do the Reddit market research stuff, I think is a good starting point. But then you come down to like, I've refined to, I want to be selling this thing to these people. Let's say like us, we're selling branding to CMOs. I need to speak to 15 CMOs or 50 CMOs to figure out, does this actually solve a real pain point in your business? And then would you be willing to pay X amount of dollars for it? So would they be willing to spend $100? Yeah. Would you be willing to spend $100,000? No. Why not? We want to sell it for $100,000. How do we make it worth, or how do we make the perceived value of it be $100,000, for instance? So then that's when you kind of have to get into the one-on-one, into the
Yeah,
weeds.
yeah. That's a very important one because a lot of people forget that it's not just that people are willing to pay, is that they need to be able to pay as well. So there's a lot of factors there, no? So like, so this is worth it, this has the value. Now I need to communicate this value, and I need to make sure that my audience, the one I researched, is willing and able to pay for what I'm giving. All right, now so let's talk about raising the prices, for example. I think this is a problem a lot of people have. And let's say that right now I want to start charging more for what I do, which actually I have been increasing my prices, and that's one thing for me. It's very important. I have two models of working with people, right? So I can work in a coaching manner, or I can actually do the writing for you, where I write the sales copy, but I can only work with one client at a time writing sales copy. For me, it's just impossible to have my brain in more than one than one business, because I need to be focused. I need to be empathizing with that audience. So let's say that I want to increase my prices. How do I go about it? Like, what do I do? How do I give people the perception that it's actually worth more?
Yeah, yeah. So now bring in some of the research that we use when it comes to like sales and stuff. So Kantar earlier this year had this whole report that came out. It was 10 years of research that they kind of aggregated into a single, I think it was like 64 pages was their report. And there was over 6 billion points of data across like 540 different brands. So it was a lot of data, a lot of industries that were covered. I think there was like 50 plus industries that were covered. And so what they found was that if you build a meaningfully different brand, what that means is it just needs to be positioned in like a bit of a, if you look at a market map that has like a y-axis and an x-axis, right? So like car dealers, like maybe Porsche will be top right, Mercedes will be top right, and then like Honda will be somewhere in the middle, right? In terms of price for the cars, and then like the luxuriness, if that's the y-axis, for instance,
Right.
right? You need to find the white space of where is there no competitors so that what you offer is not being offered by anyone else. That automatically makes it easier to sell. And then you could increase prices if,
So,
again, you're
so
sending out the right signals.
specialization, is that what you're talking about?
It could be specialization, or it could just be being able to communicate what you do in a way that resonates better with your ICP. So
Right.
for like SaaS, I'm pretty sure that no matter what thing you come up with, it's been thought of and built before. Maybe I'm wrong about that, right? But I think for like 70% of SaaS platforms or softwares, someone has thought about it, someone has tried to build it, and it didn't sell. But now there's still that white space in the market. If you're able to market it properly back to what you specialize in, it's going to sell if you're saying the right stuff to the right people.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So there's the positioning piece, which is the branding element. So like the strategy, where are we positioning our brand on this map? Where's the white space? Where's nobody operating in? And then you have to be able to market it. So hire someone for branding and then hire someone for marketing if you're not good at either, right?
How'd
If
you
you're the
find this
person
white
building the,
space?
well, that's hard. But that goes back to the whole market research stuff. That I would say just hire someone in branding who knows what they're doing. Not a
Okay.
designer, not somebody who's going to make your logo, but
Yeah.
properly like research what's being offered by whom, what's their USP, how do we create your USP so that it's differentiated from everyone else.
So I'm gonna read a few of the comments that we have here. Some of the questions.
Yeah, yeah.
What? I lost. It's yeah. How to focus on target audience for
Yeah.
branding?
I think we covered that, right? Do the research side first, and then you need to experiment, you need to test. There's going to be some trial and error involved. But if you know what their pain points are and you're speaking to those, like that's already a great starting point.
Do you want to
Don't
suggest
just guess.
some research platforms apart from Reddit?
Well, LinkedIn's a pretty good one, like especially if, like for instance, in branding, find other people in branding who have bigger accounts and
Oh
they
yeah.
get like a few hundred comments every single day on all of their posts. Read through that. Like it's going to be slightly more filtered because people don't want their names attached to deep paid points, for instance.
Yeah.
But that's another good one. ChatGPT is actually pretty good if you find like the right plugin for this kind of research. You'll be able to get some good starting points that then help you refine it. Don't use ChatGPT as the end all be all. It's a starting point. It's not the final destination. There's a lot
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
work to do, but it's a good place to start as well.
When it comes to audience research, I like to start with thought leaders. So, which is basically very easy. You can very easily find out who are the thought leaders in the industry, and you just Google top 10 people in this industry. It's very easy, or ask ChatGPT. But
Yeah.
then I start there, and I go from there, and I start reverse engineering because these people have figured out what their audiences want. If there's an overlapping audience, then now you know. And then one thing is books. Those who wrote a book, they did a lot of research for it. So,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you can go on Amazon, find the books, and actually see the chapter list. And those every single one of those chapters have been named very strategically. They have been researched. So all of those are pain points that they know their audiences have. So if it's the same audience you have, that's a great place to start.
People I feel like are so adamant about engaging, commenting, reading posts on LinkedIn, but like then go and read something more, I'll just call it legitimate because it feels a lot more legitimate, an actual book. Like 250 pages on the thing that you're interested in, right? To
Yeah,
your point.
yeah. Absolutely. And sometimes it's not even to learn about the content of the book, but to learn how the author is approaching the subject if it's in your area, you know? All right. So Lincoln asked, um, would there be one specific psychological approach you'd suggest to a business owner who is creating a brand in the advisory consulting space?
Specific psychological approach in the advisory consulting space. It depends on what the advisory and consulting is. Like, what are you consulting on? I would ask like 10 more questions before answering this properly,
Yeah.
would be my initial response. I don't like giving out answers that I don't know like the context around.
Yeah, we need more specifics. Lincoln, I don't know if you're still there, but if you are, if you can elaborate on this, Jason can give a better answer here. Then we have how to start connecting with new connections. I'm guessing you mean start relating or talking to them? I don't know.
Like building rapport probably with new connections. If you have something in common, that's always the easiest. Like you're interested in this, I'm interested in this too. That's like the icebreaker if you want. You could use humor. Humor works all the time. Like if you're able to write something funny, independent of what the common interests are, to me, like I'll respond to that. Right? In connection
Me too.
requests, if someone makes
Yeah.
me laugh, I'm like, all right, cool. Like
Yeah.
look into their profile, and then like I can do some of the legwork too. You don't even have to do it if you're sending out the connection request. Yeah, just persistence. Like people are freaking busy. Business owners, founders are freaking busy. We're all wearing like 12 different hats. If you just send a message once and expect it to like work, you're going to have to try multiple times most likely. So be persistent, get into someone's comments, like their stuff multiple times. They're going to notice you eventually.
Yeah.
And that's another way. Be visible. Yeah, yeah. To them, not just be visible altogether, but be
Yeah.
visible
Yeah.
to them.
Yeah, so being active on their stuff, like showing interest,
Yeah.
no, and psychological approach. I would guess, I would say that understanding your audience is always your best bet. Like the more you know about them, the more you can empathize and tell them about what, and talk to them about what they care, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I think maybe something that's more of a universal answer, which again, I don't even know if it's what he's asking for specifically, but there's specific, not triggers, that's not the right word, but levers for human motivation. Like if you want someone to change their behaviors, if you're a consultant, you need to figure out what's going to resonate with them. And a lot of things resonate with all humans. So like they want a sense of mastery. They want a sense of agency. This ties to like very well researched, hundreds of years old kind of research from, I mean, not the Freud days, that stuff's been disproven in many ways, but 50 years plus of research in actual frameworks, actual theories. Like they need a sense of mastery. They need a sense of agency. Environment matters. So you need to be able to speak to these three things that
That's
are
great.
deep psychological roots for every single human.
Yeah, it's all about an increase in status, isn't it?
Reputation too also matters. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because I find it interesting. Russell Brunson summarizes everything as an increase in status. He puts all of those in the same bag, and he says we're all trying to increase our status.
Yeah.
That's
I
awesome.
think that's a little oversimplified, but yeah, like
Yeah,
if it
it
works for
is.
him,
It is.
great. To a scientist, it's triggering.
Yeah, I can imagine. He's really. I admire the guy for being able to simplify concepts so well. You know, like that's one of the best things that he has, specifically as a marketer. Jason, is there anything else you want to close with?
Nothing on my end other than gratitude for the opportunity to be here. Thank you, Fran. I know we've been going back and forth for a while. We weren't connected until recently. That's a shame, although we have been reading each other's stuff for a while now, so it's cool to be able to chat. Thanks for inviting me on to spew my science and
Yeah,
what
it
we
was
do.
an absolute pleasure to have you, and I wish we could talk for another couple of hours. If there's anything you want from Jason, you can find him on LinkedIn. Is there any other social media you'd recommend people to reach out to on, or that you'd like them to be following?
I'm not on any other social media platform. Our main website's being revamped, so just get me on LinkedIn. That's the
All
best
right.
way to reach out to me.
Yeah, and you'll find if you're watching the recording, you'll find the link in the show notes to Jason's profile. The same goes for me. If you want to talk to me, find me on LinkedIn. If you're watching us on Spotify or on YouTube, make sure that you're following to see the next ones coming. Thank you very much for tuning in, and I'll see you again next week.